Today, one of the most important features of the dollar is that it's the only currency on the planet that's virtually impossible to counterfeit or hack, with a success rate exceeding 70%. This means that no matter how hard you try, it's practically impossible to breach this currency. The simplest checkpoint in the world will instantly detect counterfeit bills. This is because over the past 120 years, 127 security measures have been developed to ensure the dollar remains virtually untouchable. Usually, any story I tell you begins with a small incident or a related historical event. But this time, I wanted to start with a piece of information that might surprise you. The dollar was counterfeited, and the counterfeiter wasn't a giant corporation or a secret organization. Just one person managed to challenge the most important financial and banking system in the world. What will shock you is that the end of his story is completely unexpected, because everything was meticulously planned. With just a few moves, he was able to threaten the global market, which is worth over $45 trillion today. The strangeness of the story isn't in the idea of counterfeiting, but in how one person was able to threaten the FBI and the CIA. And in the end, the story will lead to a completely unexpected conclusion. Imagine standing in front of the head of the American Intelligence Service, and he can't do anything to you. On the contrary, I won't spoil the story for you, but I promise you it's a fantastic story. The first thing we need to know before we begin is that the dollar is considered the strongest monetary system in circulation in the world. The volume of dollars in circulation globally is $2 trillion. That means if we gathered all the dollars in the world in one place, the total would be $2 trillion in cash. Of course, this amount is currently distributed among individuals and banks in the markets. In addition to this, hundreds of countries use the dollar as a reserve currency and for pricing and exchange. From all this, we understand that this paper was designed to be one of the most difficult currencies on Earth. Why? It's difficult to counterfeit, and to do so quickly, we need to understand the security system that distinguishes the dollar bill. First, you need to know that it's not just a piece of paper, but a piece of fabric that's 75% cotton and 25% linen. Second, it has a watermark embedded within the fibers themselves. This watermark is integrated in an ingenious way that makes it impossible to counterfeit. Number 3, a polymer security thread that glows under ultraviolet light and color-changing ink that shifts from copper to green depending on the viewing angle. Number 4, microprinting at fractions of a millimeter in size. Number 5, embossed patterns that can be felt with touch. Number 6, serial numbers for each bill, centrally monitored. Number 7, and finally, continuous periodic updates to the design to keep pace with any new threat. Therefore, after all this, we can understand that any minor flaw in one of these elements is immediately detectable. That's why over more than 1 century, thousands of counterfeiting attempts have failed. Some of these attempts were backed by countries, and their goal was to counterfeit the dollar and undermine its credibility in order to end American dominance in global markets. Yet, these attempts failed. Except for one person. This person did something unexpected. He said, "Why should I copy the system from the outside? Let me understand the dollar printing system from the inside." After that, everything became easy. No matter how clever he was, and no matter how complex his creation, sovereign authorities around the world are now considering what to do. Is imprisoning him more dangerous, or is it better to leave him free?
And from here, our story began in November 2008, specifically in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of Montreal, Canada. A man was sitting with an old $20 bill in front of him, examining it with a magnifying glass glued to his eye. He was writing notes and trying out tests. And how long do you think he stayed like that? He sat there for 47 consecutive days studying the same bill. During that time, he studied every detail. The microscopic word, the size of a hair located next to the collar of former U.S. President Andrew Jackson, The color that changes from green to copper if you rotate it at a certain angle. The security thread buried between two layers of printing at a distance calculated in millimeters. The man tried to study everything about the currency, but the real problem wasn't the printing or the ink. The problem was the bill itself. As we said, the dollar bill isn't paper, it's fabric. 75% cotton and 25% linen. Good linen, that's it. Where is this fabric made, sir? Only one company in the world has been making dollar bills since 1879, and they specialize in this only. The company's name is Crane Currency. So, if you don't have this fabric, all your attempts will be exposed with a single touch from the cashier of the smallest supermarket. The hero of this video, Frank, knew this. He knew that all the counterfeiters before him failed not because of the printing, but because of the fabric. That's why he wasn't planning to counterfeit the paper, he was planning to make the fabric itself. In a little while, everything will be clear to you. Anyway, as we said, Frank spent a day making dozens of observations, but the most important observation he made on the $20 bill was that he knew the size, distribution, and shape of each micro letter printed around Andrew Jackson. He also memorized the angle of transition from green to copper, the number at the bottom right. In addition, he knew the measurement of the security thread in millimeters, which turned out to be 1.2 millimeters. The thread is buried in the left edge between the second and third layers of printing. Now, the surprise is that Frank Barassa, who's doing all this, wasn't a chemistry professor or a printing engineer. He actually dropped out of school before high school. He's a young Canadian man from Trois River who worked selling stolen car parts. He worked for a short time with cheap, illegal materials, but this young man had two qualities. These two qualities are what separate a criminal who gets caught from a criminal whose name remains a global sensation. The first is that he was incredibly patient and calm. If a bomb went off next to him, he wouldn't move. He used to say, "Sometimes I would stand in line for 6 hours and I wasn't affected or bothered in any way. What mattered to me was that the line moved, that it ended, that I got what I wanted and went home." The second quality is his keen observation skills, his ability to detect very subtle details that might not be obvious. Has anyone else in the world noticed this? Take it as a rule. Every counterfeiter in the world who tried to imitate the dollar fell into the same trap. They thought the problem was with the ink, the printing press, the hologram, or what they call the watermark. But the truth is, as we said, the problem is with the paper. Now, suppose we went to Crane Currency, located in Dalton, Massachusetts, and told them we wanted this paper. What would they tell you? She'll tell you, unfortunately, that the formula is secret. The fabric used to make the dollar bills is protected by a complete federal system within the company. Every single bill is monitored from the moment of manufacture until it reaches the official printing press. So, if you try to play dumb and ask them for this fabric, they won't give it to you. And that's not all. Just asking about this fabric will get you arrested immediately because the federal security there has absolute authority. Since you asked about this fabric, you're definitely a counterfeiter. So, what's the solution, folks? Frank only had one loophole. This banknote is high quality, and it's not an exclusive American invention. All central banks in the world use almost the same type, cotton mixed with linen and special fibers treated with secret chemicals in dozens of specialized factories in Europe. It's manufactured legally for exclusive government contracts. True, it's not the same level of protection as the American version, but it's somewhat easier there. Frank didn't want to steal the paper, he wanted to buy it, but not in his own name.
Between December 2008 and January 2009, he made contact with all the factories that worked with this fabric. He used a new name and a new identity with each factory he spoke to, but the name he used most often was Jackson Maxwell. He knew that Maxwell was the purchasing manager at a company called Keystone Investments Limited. He had a story ready. He would tell them, "We are currently issuing highly secure corporate bonds, and we need premium cotton paper with anti-counterfeiting features." He used technical language, convincing enough to avoid suspicion. The first 23 factories, from the very first email and the first phone call, hung up on him and never responded. Other factories even threatened to report him to the authorities. Any normal person would be scared and stop there. But Frank, with each contact he made, implemented new procedures to convince the next factory. He created a professional website for the company, registered a British phone number, printed official letterhead and logo, and created a professional licensed letterhead specific to the company. With these steps, he established himself. And all this while sitting in a small apartment in Canada. Then, on February 3rd, he started calling Switzerland. A small company called Artooth was convinced by his claims and initially agreed to hold talks with him. As a first step, the company asked him to specify the required specifications. Ironically, Frank didn't expect the company to agree to his request. But he was very clever. He didn't give them all the specifications at once, so he wouldn't be exposed. He told them he only had one request, that the fabric be 75% cotton and 25% linen. After 5 days, the company responded with their approval. So he made a second request. He wanted the fabric to be chemically treated with substances he mentioned, without explaining the reason. The purpose of these substances was to prevent the fabric from reacting with iodine test pens. After a few days, approval came in. So he made a third request, that each sheet have a custom watermark. They agreed, but said, "We need the design." He told them, "No problem, I'll send it in a few days." And that led to the final and most dangerous request. A few days later, he sent them an email saying, "I need a polymer security thread woven inside the paper with microprinting that says USA 20. He explained that this print represented the denomination of the bond. Logically, the story is clear, and this symbol, USA 20, should reveal everything. But strangely, Artooth agreed. They sent an official email confirming their approval of all the client's requests, stating that these requests were exclusive to Keystone Investment Limited, where Frank supposedly worked. The total cost of all these requests was $35,000 for the watermark template alone, which was manufactured in Germany and shipped to Switzerland. Frank transferred the money through a network of shell companies, a maze of interconnected entities, to prevent any information from revealing his true identity. Despite all this, he was risking everything. Because one employee's mistake, one security question could destroy everything. His entire plan could collapse, and on top of that, he could get arrested. If the security services uncovered the truth, they would keep going until they found his real identity and took him in. But the strange thing is, everything went smoothly. What you need to know is that the order took about 7 months. In December 2009, Artooth sent an email to Frank saying, "We're ready for production. We have all the necessary equipment, and we're waiting for approval to start the fabric printing process." Frank's first move was to request a small quantity. He said it was just for testing. If the shipment met his specifications, they would proceed. So, how much did he ask for? Since it was just testing, how much could he print? The answer is, the quantity he requested was enough to print $250 million. They asked him to transfer the payment for the shipment, which was $50,000. Frank put every penny he had saved or stolen over 15 years into that transfer. He said, "Either the shipment arrives and I become the most dangerous counterfeiter in American history, or I get caught and spend 30 years of my life in federal prison." In January 2010, the company contacted Frank and told him, "The paper has been printed and we're sending the shipment to Montreal." And sure enough, 20 days later, a huge wooden box was placed inside a container and headed for Montreal. Now here's the question. What could happen if Canadian Customs opened a container full of high-quality banknote paper being shipped to someone who didn't even exist? What will surprise you is that there was a small mistake in the container at first. A mistake that wasn't noticeable. But then,
On January 7, 2010, the shipment arrived at the port of Montreal. Frank never went near the port. He was standing on the roof of a parking garage 300 meters away holding binoculars. He was trying to find his money container among thousands of stacked metal containers. The man was terrified because his entire future lay there. 5 platforms unloaded unmarked boxes labeled special paper products. Customs had the right to open any container without a warrant or reason. If an inspector cut through the seal and pulled out just one piece of paper, he'd know what it was. If he held it up to the light, he'd see Andrew Jackson's face emerging from the fibers. Here's where Frank had made a clever move 3 days before the shipment's arrival. He and 2 of his partners had surveilled the port, dividing the time between them, memorizing patrol routes, knowing which area each inspector was in, how long random checks took, and when they occurred. They planned 3 escape routes and had a story ready in case the container was seized. The story was the objective. Among them, it distracts them for only 10 minutes. 10 minutes is enough for them to disappear and escape. And I'll say it again, all these plans would have been worthless if even one inspector had decided to open the box. But luckily, the container passed through without inspection. Frank didn't feel safe until the truck was 40 kilometers away from the port. The truck reached the freeway, a rented warehouse in Petro River City. Even so, he didn't touch it. He left it for 4 whole days without going near it. He would pass by the warehouse at random times, watching, looking around to see if there were any strange cars or anything else he was monitoring. He knew that sometimes the shipment would pass through, but the surveillance would come after he was 100% sure that no one was watching him. He entered the warehouse, cut the seal, and opened the box. The paper looked ordinary, white to yellowish with no printing on it, but as soon as he touched it, he knew his plan had worked. The texture was rough and smooth at the same time, and firm, unlike any commercial paper. Then he held the paper up to the light, and Andrew Jackson's face appeared. From within the fibers, not printed, it was embedded within the fabric. A polymer thread ran vertically. The US $20 symbol was repeated microscopically, making the paper sound in his hands. The sound was the same as a real dollar bill. But how do you think the company agreed to all these conditions? First, the company is registered and the transfers are legitimate. Therefore, if there's any mistake, it's easy to pursue legal action, or you can pursue the company and they'll be arrested in no time. Second, this paper will be used to print bonds worth millions of dollars. That's what they were led to believe, so it's perfectly normal for the security systems on this paper to be designed like the dollar bill. You could say the factory fell for the scam of using legitimate, respectable paper and created American currency for ordinary people. No security agency in the world knew about it. But Frank hadn't started yet. He had the canvas, but it was just a blank canvas. To print $250 million, his printer wouldn't work. He wanted something that only government printing presses produce. He wanted to carry out a counterfeit on an industrial scale. And that's where most counterfeiters fail. They print a few $100s with an inkjet printer and spend them at gas stations, and they get caught within weeks. But Frank didn't want thousands. It needed hundreds of millions. Like we said, hundreds of millions can't be printed with a regular printer. It needed equipment that cost more than many people's houses. It needed expertise he didn't have, and it needed a place unseen by neighbors, police, or even satellites. That's when Frank entered a new phase.